This morning, I want to look at a passage in Luke chapter 10. We're starting a new series, and I'm entitling the series, A Life of Balance. A Life of Balance. I want to look at a passage that probably many of you who've been to church any length of time probably have heard at least once. And it's a passage in Luke chapter 10, and it's a story about two sisters named Martha and Mary. But I want to look at it in a slightly different perspective this morning. So let me go ahead and read the passage to you. It's found in Luke chapter 10, and we're going to be looking at verses 38 through 42. Luke chapter 10, verses 38 through 42. Let me read it to you. You can look in the Bibles next to you, but just follow along. If you haven't found it, keep looking for it. But if not, just listen and hear this little short story about Jesus interacting with these two sisters. Now, as they went on their way, and this is Jesus and his disciples, Jesus entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister named Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she went up to him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her." Now, I'm sure a lot of you have heard this story about Mary and Martha, and if you haven't, you may have recognized the story maybe in your own experience, because this is a story oftentimes that maybe we tell on our sister or on our brother if we have siblings, or maybe a friend or somebody that we work with at work or at school. Whenever we feel like the brunt of the work has been given to us, when we're working on a project at work or at school, when we're supposed to do some chores around the house, and somehow our brother or sister disappears or our co-workers disappear, and all of a sudden you're left with all the work to do yourself, and you feel a sense of injustice and indignation. And so if there's someone higher up, you take it to the boss, you take it to your parents, you escalate it, you go and talk with them and say, "Hey, wait a minute, I'm working hard and I'm not going to quite get this done or done at the level that I want to do, because everybody that's supposed to be helping me, everybody that should have helped me, kind of abandoned me. And it's woe is me, and it's a sense of injustice, and it's not fair." And so if you've not seen this story before, at least you kind of recognize the feelings associated with it. And if you didn't know what Jesus answered, a lot of us would say, "Yeah, Martha, she's in the right, and Mary, what's wrong with her? She has a very important guest in our home, and she's not lifting a finger." And we all come from Asian homes. We all come from that background where we probably know how our parents were. I know how my parents were. When we had guests coming over, I had to clean up the bathroom. I had to clean up my room and probably help a little bit around the house, and everything had to be right. I had to go mow the lawn. Our house had to look like it normally didn't, because we had people coming in that would have a first impression of our home. My mom would buy more expensive food and have better food than we normally ate, and the plates that we never used would come out, and we all have to dress better than we normally would. That's what it would be. And so that's what Martha was thinking when she invited Jesus and the disciples into her house. And so when you look at the story, there's several lessons that we could possibly learn. One of them that Jesus says is like, "Hey, let me turn this around for you. All of you have had experiences like this, but let me tell you something. It's more important with Jesus to listen to him than just blindly go around serving." So that could be a lesson that we can learn. Or it could be this kind of simple aphorism that busyness isn't godliness. Or it could be choose what is better, a relationship with Jesus, not just doing things for Jesus. All of those could be good takeaways from this little story. But as we begin this series, what I want to tell you is this. One of the things that's really critical for our lives is this simple word, balance. Balance. Think about it. What do we call people that are crazy, that are lunatics, that are off the deep end? We call them what? Unbalanced. And even if you take someone that excels in their field, let's say they've succeeded, great success in business or at work or financially or in their field of expertise or in athletics or whatever they've achieved, and you look up at them and you respect their achievements. They're the best student. They're the fastest promoted executive. They're someone that's gone high in their industry. They're becoming a CFO, a CEO, whatever. They're going forward. They're making a lot of money. They're making a big splash. And you see all that. We respect that in our culture, in our society. There's nothing wrong with being a little bit extreme, working really hard and really diligently. But if we find out that their marriage is a shamble, or their kids hate them, or every home they go to an empty house and they're lonely and they drink all night long, or they're doing drugs, or their private life is a shamble and it's not balanced, that they have extreme success in one area but the rest of their life is chaotic, we look upon that with sadness. We kind of say, oh, yeah, I wouldn't trade my life for that. Balance is such an important word for us. And it's actually a very practical thing that the Bible teaches again and again and again. The problem is that we often look at the balance that's taught in the Bible and we think it's confusion. Sometimes we think the Bible contradicts itself in the way that it teaches. But what the Bible is trying to say, look, God is calling us to radical discipleship, to radically serving Him, to giving our all to Him. But the reason why it seems like there's a contradiction oftentimes in the Bible is because when we do radical things, God also calls us to radical extreme in other areas in order to what? Balance us out. Let me give you an example. There's a passage in the Bible in Matthew that says this. And I'm going to paraphrase it so you don't have to turn there. In Matthew 6, verses 2 and 3, it talks about this. It says, when you do something charitable, when you do a good gift, when you do a good act, when you give something away, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, that your good deed may be done in secret, that your Father who sees it done in secret will reward you. That's what the Bible says. In other words, when you do a good deed, don't trump it. Don't make a big show of it. Don't say, look what I'm doing, because sometimes we have a kind of a secret desire to do that because we want other people to praise us. We want other people to recognize something good that we've done. You know, I know this is very true with my children because sometimes, I come home and they've done something, and this is not recent, but a while back, and then, my daughter goes like, hey, you see what's going on? And I'm like, oh, then I know who did it because she's pointing it out. The other daughter doesn't point it out. Why? Because she didn't do it. I have a good friend whose parents used to do good deeds for one another. And I remember one time he was sharing the story about his dad. His dad bought his mom her dream car, but he couldn't wait, for her birthday to give it to her, to show it to her. And so they were all ready to go out to dinner later on in the evening, a few hours later, but he drove the car and parked it in the driveway, and put a bow on it, just like all those commercials. He did all of that. And then he went in the house, and then he couldn't wait until 6 o'clock until they were ready to go out to dinner to show her the car. So he's like, hey, honey, why don't you go outside for a bit? She goes, no, it's hot. I don't want to go outside. No, really, why don't you go out? Hey, let's go take a walk. No, I don't want to go outside. It's hot. We're going to go out at dinner time anyway, so let's just wait till that. And they kept going back and forth, and he kept wanting to push her to go outside. Say, why do you want me to go outside? And they got in a big fight right before they went out to eat dinner. We want people to recognize. We want people to see it. And what God says in Matthew 6 is, don't even let your left hand know your right hand doing it. Do it in secret so your Father can reward you. And then Peter, in 1 Peter, you know what he says? He says this, live such good lives among the people in the world that they, even though they might accuse you of doing wrong, they'll see the good deeds that you do and they'll glorify God. They'll glorify God. So which is it, Bible? God, what is it? Am I supposed to do it so that nobody sees in secret? Or am I supposed to live it out loud so that people will see it and give you glory? Which is it? And so sometimes what seems like a contradiction, the Bible seems to be contradicting itself, is not really that. It's talking about balance. And here, the analogy of balance for doing good deeds, let me sum it up this way because I don't want to just leave it hanging. It's like a plant or a tree. What do you have below the ground? You have roots. What do you have above the ground? You have the fruit. And if you look at it carefully, balance is just like that. You need deep roots that are not seen in order to have great fruit that are seen. And when we're balanced, that's what happens. Right now, for the last, about 6 or 7 months, I had a cornucopia, I get to use that word, of tomatoes in my backyard. I told you guys, some of you have had them. So I've had these humongous organic tomatoes that have been just growing on my vines like crazy. And my father-in-law planted in my backyard, and I had more tomatoes than I know what to do with. I was giving them away to neighbors. I gave them away to some of you guys. We're making pico de gallo at church all the time, cutting up the tomatoes, and they were good. And then we had that crazy heat spell that's like out of nowhere, right? Like that week, and I was gone. Remember, that 1 week of just like the 100+ temperature in degrees. So who watered that tomato plant? Nobody. It just shriveled up. And what I realized is the roots aren't deep in tomato vines. So I had all this fruit, but the roots weren't deep. And I started watering it every day. I flooded it every day. It just died, and all the tomatoes were shriveling up on the vines. That's why you guys aren't getting tomatoes lately. But that tomato plant is shot, so I just took it out, and I'm chopping it down. And there's another one that was green that hadn't ripened yet. And so that one, there's hope. So maybe in another few weeks. But you know what? Without balance, that's what happens. We seem like we're excelling. All these things are going on. And then all of a sudden, something difficult comes, and we get capsized. We get knocked off. Here in the story of Martha and Mary, here's what I want to point out to you. Jesus is talking to Martha and to Mary and to everyone else there. It's okay to serve passionately, diligently, to pour out, to be tired when you serve. Actually, Jesus challenges us to do that. Pour out your life. Be radical. But he's saying here, in verse 40 is the key, don't be distracted with that serving. What does that mean? What do I mean, don't be distracted? Another word maybe that would have been better translated there in our modern language would be, don't be preoccupied. Don't be set on just that one thing of serving. You know what a lot of us, we get preoccupied on? We get preoccupied on the task, or on money, or on the goal. And so what Jesus is gently trying to tell Martha is, it's okay. I mean, Jesus is not going to say, hey, don't serve me your best food. Just give me, oatmeal and, whatever gruel. That's okay with me. It's not that Jesus wanted the best food or didn't want the best food. He's saying, do your best, but I'm not going to judge you by whether or not you're matching the kingly feasts out there. Think about it. For so many of us, we get sidetracked in that exact same way. Sometimes when we go out with our friends, you know what it's about? It's about yelping and figuring out what's the best place to eat. What's the best food? Oh, I don't want to go there. That only has 4.5. Let's find a 5-star place, Seriously, I see this all the time. I said, what's really important here? It's not going with your friend to eat. It's going with your friend to eat. Right? Otherwise, pick all the 5-star restaurants and go there by yourself and have all that good food just by yourself. Don't share. Because when you go with friends, they don't pay the same amount and they eat more. A lot of friends. You always have friends like that. There's always one in the crowd who forgot their wallet, who doesn't have as much money, but they eat just as much, if not more, okay? And I don't want to point them out. There's some in the audience. No, I'm teasing. I used to be that too, especially when you're poor. So what is it? Jesus says, Mary has chosen what is better. What's better? If you go back a few verses in chapter 10, Jesus already talks about it. I'm not going to point you back, but if you read this chapter later on, you'll find this. Jesus says, what's the greatest commandment? He's asked. What does he say? Love the Lord your God, all your heart, soul, strength, and mind. And then the second is like it. What is it? Love your neighbor as yourself. And then Luke, we have that famous thing. The guy says, well, who's my neighbor? Because he wants to justify it. And then the whole story about the Good Samaritan, about how someone's a good read it if you have a chance. Luke 10. It's a great chapter to read. But basically what Jesus says, and that's why he doesn't point out here what Mary has chosen that's better. She's chosen balance, which requires the right focus on relationship, not at just the task at hand. So let me give you a few pointers from Mary that Martha is being taught, that Jesus wants to teach all of these folks, and you and I here this morning as well. The first thing that I want to point out to you is that it began as being all about Jesus, but then it ended up being all about Martha. Whenever we do anything in our life, we will be balanced as Christians if we make it about Jesus, not about me. If I make church about me, if I make pastoring and ministering about me, you guys are going to be in trouble. It's not about me. It's about Jesus. If I make it about how many people are watching my sermon on YouTube, how many people are, commenting and saying, "Oh, Pastor, good message," or how many people are following me, then that's not what the church is supposed to be. It's about Jesus. See, Martha, without knowing it, made it about her. Now, is this food going to be up to par? How are people going to judge me? Is my house clean enough? All of those kinds of things. We don't want to make it about ourselves. We want to make it about Jesus. In the beginning, when Martha invites Jesus, she invites him into her home. But shortly after getting all the serving stuff started, she loses sight of the fact that what Mary is doing is better. See, what Mary is doing is relating with Jesus. How many of you have ever done this? I hope not. But sometimes you get so busy when you invite somebody over and you just want to give them the best meal and you want to do it. And then as the host or hostess, you're so busy running in and out of the kitchen that by the end of the day, you haven't really sat and talked with them and interacted with them. And you know what? As guests, when we go to people's houses, the first thing that enters our mind shouldn't be how clean is their home, how amazing is the food, but how welcoming, how interested in me are they? Now, we could have pizza for all we care. I know part of it is to present the best. That's great, but make sure that in doing so, you're focusing on them. How sad that it is with Martha that she put out a great spread. She was doing all these things, and she wanted to do more, but she hadn't even sat and listened to Jesus. She hadn't even related with him, communicated with him. But Mary, from the very beginning, was doing that. I'm not saying Mary isn't a hard worker. I'm not saying she's lazy. And I'm not even saying that she's always doing what's better than Martha. I don't know their relationship. I think they were both godly women. And probably Martha was, this is my guess, okay, just from human experience, Martha was probably the older sister. You know what I'm saying, right? The older child. I got to get the task done. The responsibility, everything falls upon her. It was probably her home more than it was Mary's. And Mary was just like, oh, I'm just going to enjoy myself. And in enjoying herself, she picked the better thing. Make it about Jesus, not about you. Make work about Jesus, not about you. Make school about Jesus, not about you. Make ministry about Jesus, not about you. And it becomes so much better. At school, I stressed out a lot about my grades. And then when I became a Christian, my grades didn't plummet. But I started stressing a lot less about it. You know why? Because I said, what do you want me to get out of college? And, Jesus didn't directly speak to me, but what I sensed was, it's about me becoming a better person. It's about me knowing Jesus Christ. It's about me relating with others, my teachers, my friends, all these folks. And so doing the best that I can to become a better person, to use what giftings I have to serve others. And so that made it so much less stressful. A B, okay? A few C's I got, okay? A's I got, all right. I used to stress that all the time. Freshman year, I got all A's. And then it went down a little bit. But I did okay. But I wasn't stressed out as much. And I worked hard. I studied hard. But I went to all the functions that I thought were important. I went to all the Bible studies. I went to all the church worship services. And I put those as a priority, not because I was legalistic, but because it was about Jesus, not about me. The second thing that I want to point out to you that's kind of in this passage is this, that you need to remember that you are, and this is the same focus all over again, it's all the same point, that you're serving Jesus when you're serving, and you're serving people when you're serving. Otherwise, you're just working. Serving and working is different. When Martha began, she started serving, but at the end it became work. That's why she comes to Jesus. And what does she say? She says, Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Basically, change that word to work. Tell her to help me. You think she went to Jesus and said, Jesus, don't you care? No, she didn't do that. She came out in the middle of there and said, Jesus, in a voice loud enough so that Jesus heard, that Mary heard, that everybody else heard, that this sister is lazy. This is what she wanted to shame her into coming and doing some work with her. Don't let anybody shame you to work in the church. It may be hard. It may be, require lots of difficult effort. It may not be the most fun thing, but the way you keep it from being grudging work and to making it service is to remember you're not doing it to just accomplish a task. You're doing it to honor God and to serve people. Whatever task that it is. Sometimes when I serve my girls, making food for them, cleaning up after them, I get frustrated. And you know what parents do when they get frustrated, right? We pull them aside and we yell at them. That's how we get. That's when I know I need to sit back and reassess to serve them rather than making it purely work, because it's a lot of work. I'm serious. I don't even want to go clean my daughter's bathrooms except once a month, because I'd rather do it once a month than do it weekly, because it just, forget it. I clean my bathroom regularly, but theirs, I'm like, no, I don't want to go in there yet. And actually, I've had Captain clean it, and she said it took her 2 hours, so it took a while. The way we keep serving from becoming work is to remember it's about people. It's about relationships. That couple I told you about, my friend's parents, they're just a crack up. I just love them. But they had another happening, and this was back a long, long time ago. I still remember, maybe it was my freshman year in college. But the parents bought, maybe mid-college. I guess it wasn't quite out then, but some kind of video game system for their family, like Nintendo or something, Mario Brothers. And so they were all supposed to play it as a family. And so my friend tells me the story, and I could totally picture this. But the parents never fight. That car fight was one, but they never fight. And one morning, they woke up at 3 in the morning, he and his sister, to this blowout. Yelling and literally nothing thrown yet, no violence physical, but they'd never heard them this angry. And they just go downstairs and they look in, and mom and dad are just fighting, and they listen in and they find out what they're fighting about. They're fighting after having played Super Mario Brothers. So what happened was they bought this 4 or 5 weeks before, and the mom got addicted. She would stay up all night playing Super Mario. And she was the best in the family. She just destroyed the children. She said, can you invite the neighborhood kids? I want to play the best in the neighborhood kids. I'm serious. She was just she has that kind of addictive personality. And she just was amazing at it. She would bribe kids with Coke and candy to come and play from church. And then she just destroyed, nobody can defeat me, that kind of a thing. And then the father played her once and just got annihilated, because he doesn't even know how to play. And then, so secretly at night, he began to stay up playing and practicing, because he's a competitive guy too. And so the mom, one day was saying, oh, you want to play? And he's like, yeah. And he said, hey, let's make it interesting. This is what he's saying. Let's bet money, yongton, or spending money. And so that's what they did. And they played viciously till 3 or 4 in the morning. But at the end, he couldn't win one game. Couldn't defeat her even once. And so his pride and he just threw it, and they started getting a big blowout and argument, and just a lot of stuff that I guess was piled up came out. What happened? something that was bought for the enjoyment of the family, for entertainment, it became a battleground. Why? It became a competition. It became the purpose to win. I'm a competitive person too. And I realize that whenever it breaks down somewhere along the line, the goal being to win, the relational part goes away. And you know what happens? The other person that loses all the time no longer wants to play, and relationship gets broken. When we serve a church, whatever we do, if we remember its people, it's so much easier. Sometimes we come to church on Sunday. This room gets used as a multi-purpose room, and I know E-Man and a few other guys that come early, they help clean up. I know a lot of you guys do. But sometimes I know we get frustrated. Oh, man, I know who did this. I know who did that. And I feel like that sometimes too. But then ultimately, the only thing that sets me straight on that is, but there's people who are going to come worship today. Let's serve them. God is going to be worshiped. Let's serve him. That's what turns it around. The final thing that I want to point out to you is the answer that Jesus gives and how he teaches us to have balance. And this is what he says. He says, Martha, Martha, you're anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her. The point here is keep the main thing the main thing. Everything that we do, let us be zealous about it. Let us be diligent about it. Let us pour ourselves out in it. Let's, pour out all our strength, all our creativity, all our energy. But let's not forget the one thing. And what's that one thing going back to? It's that to love Jesus Christ, to love God with all that we have, and to love people as ourselves. When we begin to do those things, when we begin to reflect on all those things, when we pour out ourselves and we do all those things, what all of a sudden comes into focus again is it puts us back into balance in our life. See, when we use the word centeredness in this world, what people are talking about is somehow coming to a place of calm, coming to a quiet place. But for Christians, it's not that. Centeredness means that we return back to the fact that God is in control. Coming back to the fact that God loves us. Coming back to the fact that we can do nothing to be separated from his love once we've received the grace and love of Jesus Christ. And when we remember all those things, then everything else fades away. You see, so many times I, just like you, used to be swayed by the opinions of other people. Trust me, even as an older, person now, more than half my life over, for the longest time, what my parents said or thought affected me. Not that I just, did whatever they wanted to, but they could crush you with one word, right? Why did you do that? Oh, how stupid. Or why are you still doing that? My sister, I remember, she knowing me all my life, could say things that would be sharp and hurting of me. Or people around me could criticize me in a certain way, and all of a sudden, all my confidence, all my passion would seep away and just go away, and you'd be like devastated. Why? Because our center is ourselves. Our center is our accomplishments. Our center is our own self-esteem. Our center is what other people say about us. Our center. And that's why it's so often said about people who, are flaunt their material things or to always constantly brag and exaggerate. We all have some of that in there about our accomplishments because we lack confidence and centeredness. But when it's in Christ, it cannot be changed. Even if someone says, hey, you messed up, or you screwed up, or what a terrible mistake, or man, everybody else would have figured that out. How stupid of you to do that. And all of that, you may say, yeah, you're right, but I'm a child of God, and God loves me. It centers you. And it balances you. Some of us have so much guilt over our sin, over our past, over things that we've messed up on. And maybe we've done it, made promises and broken them again and again, or we've sinned and we try to break out of them, keep falling back again and again. And so we get sucked back and we let Satan deceive us. And what we do is we say, oh, I'm not good enough to be used of God. And so what happens is we don't even try to serve. And that's the opposite of Martha, of serving too much. We serve not at all or too little. And God says balance is when you look at Jesus and say, even a broken, messed up person like me, he'll use. Do you see why that's so great? Do you see why that is so important for our lives? Read the Bible carefully, but the Bible calls us to a passionate life that's balanced. Let me leave you with an image. And I don't know if this is the best image because maybe most of us haven't done it, but think about anything that you like in your life that requires balance. Let's think of a physical activity. Snowboarding, skiing, water skiing, I don't know, whatever it is. For me, I don't like skiing, water skiing, any of those things. My image is this. When I was a kid, we had little creeks around where I lived and grew up. And I kind of lived like a Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn childhood. We were like dirty all summer long. We just were rampant, and we were in the mud, and we caught crayfish and sold them, and we caught mice. We killed rattlesnakes. I know, crazy stuff. We did all these kinds of crazy things. There was a lot of kind of wild area near where I lived. But I remember when I was a child, I don't remember what it was, but there was somebody came up with it, but there was some scrap wood and stuff, and they put it together, and they made this kind of like floating thing that you could stand on and balance yourself on. Except in the beginning, we all fell over because we didn't have balance. But as we got to do it more and more, and kept challenging one another, because we, our pride we actually became really good, and we could have a little stick and paddle. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the beginning. We invented, paddle boarding. I don't know. But it was that, and we would do it on these creeks, and even with waves, we'd be like riding them out. Why? It requires practice, a sense of balance. And we just got centered. In the beginning, you'd sit down. We would kneel, sit down, and we got bolder, got standing up, and we'd do all of that. The thing about being centered in our life as Christians is that we have to know the Word of God, and we have to constantly pour ourselves into it. How did you get better at whatever thing that you balanced? Let me tell you one thing that I learned from all that balancing. Number one is I didn't look at myself and my feet like I did in the beginning. Eventually, what did I begin to look at? What do you look at when you balance any of those sports? Horizon, farther off, right? If you look right there, you know you're going to wipe out. In the beginning, you're so unsteady, so you're looking at your feet. Ice skates, anything, you look at your feet. You look a little bit in front of you. You're expecting to fall, so you're like this. But later on, when you're getting better and better, you start looking further off. You have a perspective, a distant point you're looking at. We lose balance in our life because we look too often at ourselves and not enough at Jesus Christ. This is just a rote number. I think I read it somewhere. Look 10 times at Christ, then once at yourself to evaluate. Don't look 10 times at yourself and then once at Jesus Christ to evaluate, because that's what we're so often prone to do. Because if we do it that way, we get stuck and mired and imbalanced. But if we look at Christ, we transform and change. And we're not stuck in our self-deprecation, and we're not stuck in our overachieving trying to please God. Rather, we focus upon Him, and everything we can or can't do, we bring to Him. May we do that. May that be something that we learn from Mary this morning. Let's pray together this morning.